Good morning, gentlemen. God is great. The truth makes it through everything, doesn't it? And I'm so eternally blessed this week. Just had the opportunity to interact with people from all across this country and in our community. And I know this sounds a little bit geeky, but I'm just going to go for it. Ox Strong works. And last night was one of those moments of truth. I had Dr. Whitman over. We were watching the football game. I might have gotten a little animated a few times, but I love those Hawks. But point being is we started having a talk with my son, Ryan, and there is a man that is confident in Jesus and confident what he does in his life, and just so proud of him. And he seems to have the right answers so far. And so I look back to say, how did he get there? And it's the faith of his family and a strong mother, a strong church, strong relationships, good choices. And so I just want to remind you that Ox Strong, it works. It's done wonders for my life, so in a selfish way. Speaking of other selfish ways, I had the opportunity to talk about some issues I was having with just in my life. And don't worry, I'm fine. And went to two providers, and it was just an incredible day. And when it came down to it, how am I going to take care of this and how am I going to take care of that? And both of the providers said, prayer. And it's stunning. Both of them in that one day said that. I was also reminded this week of when your faith is at its weakest point, your ears open up, and all of a sudden beautiful things happen. And so we had beautiful things happen for our school this week, and I'm just so grateful for Ox Strong and all the things that are going on. So I just wanted to remind you all, keep your faith, keep strong. The truth makes it through everything. I think we're finding that in our weak moments that we've had, angry at God, etc. He is alive. He is well. He is in our hearts. And I cannot say enough to encourage you. Get into His Word. Find His Word. That's what we do at Ox Strong. That's what Nate does. He's a beautiful writer. You've seen his works. Take a moment. It's there. It's Jesus and Cliff Notes right there for you, right? You maybe not want to open up your Bible. Open up your computer. Take a look at what has to be said. Listen to the stories of the men around you and the fabric of greatness that is going to happen. And I was reminded that John the Baptist, in 2 days, baptized 8,000 men, right? How many people do we have in Grinnell? Can it be done? Yeah, we're doing it our way. And I'll tell you, I was touched. I talked to a young lady, and she said, boy, my husband sure likes this Ox Strong. It's really made a difference in his life. And so it is working. And so proud of you to be here today. I'm so grateful the fact that we're opened up today to share God's Word and to share Kevin's story. Looking so forward to hearing what he has to say. He's a great man. We've had a lot of fun together, and be careful when you high-five him. He might rip your shoulder out of your body. But outside of that, I think he's a Cyclone fan, though. Are you? Oh, that'll work. See, everybody comes together in one spirit of love here. So, no high fives for me this morning, Kevin. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over. Have some announcements, some other blessings from Brother Nate here.
Sir, I love that Ox Strong can also be a resourceful ministry. We're not looking at bringing money in for ourselves to build ourselves up, but Skip and I do a good job of keeping our eyes open for the needs in our community, and as well as many of you guys in your churches as well do a great job of that. And it was just neat to hear a report from John Green this week. Just went through his last radiation treatment. So continue to keep him in your prayers. He's been a faithful attender here at Ox Strong and through GCC. So keep him in your prayers and his family as well. Just the ministry of the Christian school here. There's been funds coming in after Matt Augustine spoke, so we thank you very much for just helping in any way that you can. However God leads you to, it's been great to see men step up and just help out. So thank you for that. It's encouraging when you can go to work and have fellow coworkers who are believers in the Lord. You can go to that person and you can have those conversations and you trust them. And it's just nice to have that person alongside you. Sometimes coaching gets a bad rap as far as it's for the rough. It's not necessarily sometimes seen as the Christian avenue path to take. But when you can get into coaching, something that you love, and you can have someone right alongside you who is a fellow believer, it's encouraging. It makes a big difference. And I have found that in Kevin, being a coworker, being a co-coach. It's been awesome to get to know him and his family. Our daughters do a lot of things together too, and it's nice to know I can send them over to his house when need be, and I can trust the environment that they're going to be in, and that goes a long way in our world today. So, Kevin, you mean the world to me, man. Looking forward to hearing your story and how God's worked in your life, so bring it.
All right. Thank you, Nate. Skip. Fellas, good morning. I know some of you. I've got two of my best friends here, so I appreciate them coming and supporting me. I have done a lot of public speaking in my life, mainly in the business world. A couple things with FCA growing up. You'll hear in my story how I grew up, but probably in the past 5 or 10 years, this will be kind of my first bearing of my soul, of my weaknesses, and how God's worked in my life to grow men and to people that I walk in community with. So be patient with me if I struggle, but we'll get through it. My name is Kevin Stensrud, for those that don't know me. Live here in Grinnell the last 5 years. I grew up, some of you recognize that last name. I get that a lot. I'm going to start kind of with my just growing up story. My father is Mike Stensrud, played 11 years in the NFL. Went to Iowa State, hence the Iowa State passion. And a little blurb from my father, he's considered one of the best players to ever come out of that school. And so we've got a tight following and loyalty with them. But I was born in Houston, Texas when he was with the Oilers. He was the Houston Oilers' first pick in 1978, defensive tackle. And so I was born in 1982, 3 years later. So I spent the first 6 years of my life living in Houston while he was with the Oilers. I had a charmed childhood. I had a charmed all the way through. I've had a charmed life, really, and I will admit it. I have struggled for nothing. My childhood consisted of before 9/11 in the NFL. There was no security, so my childhood consisted of going to NFL practice every day, hanging around legends like Earl Campbell, Archie Manning. Archie Manning was a family friend of ours, and we grew up with Peyton and Eli at practice. Okay, we would go to each other's birthday parties as kids. Back in the Houston culture back then, when professional sports was booming, Nolan Ryan was a pitcher with the Astros. All the professional athletes hung out together. It was kind of a fraternity, and so that was my childhood. I grew up with all these famous guys. Grew up with money. Grew up with every kid wanting to be me. Every kid, when you ask them, when I talk to kids at school, when I do I coach a lot. When I talk to kids, they all want to be professional athletes: baseball player, basketball player, football player. Right? Every kid wants to be a professional athlete. And so I had that life, and it plays into my story because it plays into something that we'll talk about as an adult when you actually get to self-realizing what kind of a man you are and what kind of faith you have. I want you to know that background of how I grew up because it's a struggle that I carry today with inner ego and inner growing up as a kid thinking everyone thinks you're cool because of how you grow up, you carry some of that with you. So going there, my dad gets cut or traded actually in 1986 to the Minnesota Vikings. Okay, so I traveled, obviously our family traveled. We're from Lake Mills, Iowa. That's where we're from, town of 1,500 up on the Iowa-Minnesota border on I-35. And so we moved to Minneapolis for a year, and then that was, towards the tail end of my dad's career. He got traded 4 years consecutively in a row to Tampa, Kansas City, then to Washington. So when I was 11, we were living in the D.C. area. My dad got cut. Just a funny story about how the NFL works, and everyone, it's a business, right? You hear that all the time in professional sports. It's a business. My dad, we were at the grocery store. My dad sees Joe Gibbs. Joe Gibbs is the head coach at the time. And our whole family's at the grocery store. And he sees Coach, and he goes up to Coach. He says, "Hey, Coach, how you doing? Looking forward to minicamp, Gibbs looks at my dad and says, "Stensrud, didn't we just cut you?" And my dad hadn't known yet. The word hadn't got from the agent to my dad. And so he's like, "Oh, that's news to me." He goes, "Well, sorry to bear the bad news, but we just cut you." He's like, "Oh, okay. Well, we leave the grocery store not just with groceries, but crushed dreams." So he ended up retiring after that, and we stayed in the D.C. area, and my dad was going to work with the NFL and work with the Redskins and player development and stuff. But that spring, his father died unexpectedly at age 65. And Mom was alone on the farm. His brothers and sisters were scattered across the country, and he's like, "I have the financial means to go home and take care of Mom." So that's what we did. So we ended up back in Lake Mills for high school, and that's kind of where I call home is Lake Mills, where he took care of his mom till she passed, and then that's where they retired. Okay, growing up, my dad is a godly man, was a godly man, is a godly man, but as an adult, we all struggle, right? We're all human, we're all sinners, and we all struggle. But as a kid, I never saw it with my father. He hid it well. And we'll talk about that a little later. But as a high school kid in small town Lake Mills, Iowa, 1A school, my brother and I, and my other brother, I've got two brothers, and we were the stars in high school. I mean, it's a 1A school, father, NFL. We're big, we're strong. We spent all our time training, and we were all state in everything we did, all three of us. To continue the kind of ego that I had built up that I didn't know at the time, but that it was building. My brother, who's 4 years older, was one of the first blue chip athletes to come out of Iowa. At the time, him and Dean Oliver, I don't know if you remember that name, Dean Oliver from Mason City, they both committed to Iowa and Iowa State respectively as freshmen in high school. So it was kind of like unheard of at the time, where kids were accepting scholarships and coaches were going after young kids when they haven't really even proved themselves yet at the varsity level. Well, my brother, in 8th grade, I remember it. We took trips to Duke, we took trips to North Carolina, we took trips to Kansas, and I mean, you've got Coach K, you've got Dean Smith, you've got Roy Williams just laying on the charm for my brother and my parents and the whole recruiting process, So not only I grow up with a dad being in professional sports, and then as I'm maturing into adolescence, I've got all these coaches thinking my family's the greatest, right? And I see these guys on TV, and they want my brother to come play for them. And it was like the coolest thing ever, Everywhere we went, every home game was packed. Coaches there watching my brother, and it's like, oh, there's the Stensrud kid, and you hear that, and you're like, well, that's my brother, that's. Ego keeps building and building and building. Even though we're Christian people, I mean, we know that everything we've got comes from God, but as humans, as sinners, the ego just kept building. As I evaluate my life, it's just like nothing can stop me, And so that same process, he ends up, back then, everyone's kind of wondering, why did he choose Iowa State? Well, we had the family ties at Iowa State, but at the time, Fred Hoiberg, that was the Fred Hoiberg days of Iowa State. Tim Floyd was there, and those teams were good. You know, they were competing in the Sweet 16, Elite 8, I think, one year. And so he commits to Iowa State, okay? And so I'm not going to go into the story of my brother because that's kind of a tragic story because he could have been and should have been better than my father, but things happened in college where he ended up never even playing basketball. I'm sure some of you that followed him know that. As a senior in high school, he was Mr. Football for Iowa. And so Coach McCartney said, hey, you've already got full scholarship on the basketball. I've talked to Floyd. He's willing to let you walk on the football team. You already got full scholarship, but you're obviously a great football player. We want you on our team. And he's like, okay. He loved football. So he was going to try to be a two-sport athlete at Iowa State. Well, my brother is not gifted academically, to put it nicely. And so he gets there. He's Big 12 Freshman of the Year as a tight end, okay? Outstanding season. Ego, right? The ego that we had as a kid, as kids. He didn't go to class. You know, ended up being academically ineligible after the football season. Never got set foot on the basketball court. Ended his basketball career. He's like, he understood that college athletics is a job. Like it's hard work. And so he's like, he's already got. I mean, draft analysts are saying he's going to play one more year and be drafted in football. So he's like, screw basketball. I'm just going to stay with football, which if you talk to him, if he was up here, and we're going to talk about integrity, and he'll tell you that was one of the first moments in his life where he broke his integrity. He committed to Tim Floyd to play basketball. Tim Floyd trusted our family and trusted him to be a contributor to the basketball team. My brother never played basketball, never fulfilled that commitment, okay? Ended up, he did have a decent career, played a few years in the NFL, made some money, and the rest is history, and he's doing great with his family now. But integrity is one of the things I'm going to talk about in here, but it kind of just shows you the slow progression of my family, and if you're not walking with the Lord, how your integrity can get out of whack. So my story, I'm All-State High School. I'm not nearly as big as my family. My dad's 6'6", my brother's 6'9", my younger brother's 6'9". I was good enough. I had all kinds of walk-on offers to D1, but took a full ride to UNI to play football. I had a great career. Was All-American. We almost won a national title. We got second my senior year. We lost to Appalachian State. And I met my wife there. My wife is Rachel Stensrud. And she's a huge part of this story we'll talk about. She runs a mental health clinic here in town with Brandon Davis, who I think Brandon comes quite a bit. Brandon comes here, right? Yep. Yeah, and so she's a partner with him, and met her. She was an All-American volleyball player. And so back to my ego story, All-American volleyball player, All-American football. We were the big couple on campus. We got married in college, okay? So we were like, everywhere we went, we got interviewed for the school paper, and she was, and I'll tell you, she was a better athlete than I was. Some of you don't know, she's now the volleyball coach here, but she was, her senior year, invited to Colorado Springs to play with the U.S. Olympic team that went to China, won gold. I ruined her dreams because we were married at the time, and as she's heading out to Colorado Springs, she finds out she's pregnant with our first daughter. So she had to withdraw from the team, but we'll get into that. I graduate. I messed around in NFL training camps, was with the Bills for a year, was with the Chiefs for a year, got cut on the third cuts every time, so I never made it. My life had consisted of, you're going to play football. Like that's your dream, that's your passion. Your dad did it, your brother did it. That's what I'm going to do. I developed no interests other than training for football and playing football. That's what I was going to do. So I'm married at the time. I've got a kid. I'm working at Come and Go, thinking, when's my next NFL opportunity going to come? Because that's the only thing I want to do. It's the only thing I know how to do. And it never came, okay? It never came. And so, obviously, with a wife and a newborn, you got to make some money, right? And you got to get on with your life. You got to provide for your family. And providing for your family is one of those things where I think us men, like, it's important to us. Like, we're called to do that. We're called to take care of our family and be the leaders of our family. And I knew that. I knew that growing up, and that's what I wanted to do. But I thought I was going to do that through football. And when that didn't happen, I was lost. I had no idea what to do. So, leaning on some relationships that my father had, I went and took a job with an insurance company in Chicago as an investigator for high-rise claims fraud, for high-rise cranes that build cranes all across the country, all the major cities. And so we've got a newborn. We're living in downtown Chicago. My wife, who, when we got married, made it very clear to me that her passion, like her calling, was to be a motherhood. Like, she just had this, I don't care how much money we have, I don't care how we do it, I want to stay home and raise our kids, and then after that, whatever happens, happens. Like, she was very upfront. If you know my wife, she's brutally honest, okay? It's taken me years to figure that out, but she's just brutally honest, okay? Good, bad, ugly, she just tells you how it is. And I'm thankful for that, because, you know, I struggle a little bit about fluffing everything up and making everyone happy. And making everyone happy is kind of what I want to talk about here. Making the right people happy is what's important. But and so I had this pressure, like, my wife wants to stay at home, she's not going to get a job. I agreed to it. I have to provide, okay? So this job was, the CEO was my godfather, my dad's best friend and college roommate, and very successful. He's like, sure, you know, come on, and I'll give him a job. And I was flying all over the country. Anytime a crane would tip over, anywhere, I would fly and go investigate, make sure our company was liable or not, and pay the claim. And, well, downtown Chicago, away from family, I was gone all the time, and my wife's like, what? I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, but I didn't want to do it alone, okay? And so, all right, so that pressure kept building and building, okay? I did that job for 2.5 years. We got bought out. He sold the company to a company in Atlanta, and we went to Atlanta. Now we're even further away from home. The tugging on my heart, I knew my wife wasn't happy. She wanted to be at home with some support, but yet I still took her, selfishly, I took her to Atlanta, further away from her family. She was still going to be alone because my job didn't change. I was still flying all over the country. But it's selfishly, the ego in me, like, I'm going to provide for my family, and I'm making great money, and she gets to stay at home. Like, what's the problem, you know? My stubbornness was like, she's suffering, doing this alone, raising my firstborn child alone, while I'm thinking I'm doing the godly right thing by making all the money so she can do that. Tension was building in our marriage. Obviously, you can see where this is going. And I remember Christmas 2007. I'm 23rd, a crane goes down in Manhattan. It's like, oh, really? Christmas time? I got to get on the plane and go. So she's like, well, I'm not doing Christmas alone. She gets in a car, drives home to Waterloo. And then I'm there Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, all the way through New Year's investigating this accident. She calls me and she's like, Kevin, I'm not coming home. And she's like, we can stay married, I love you, and we will stay married, but I'm not coming home. Like, I have so much support here, her whole family's here. Raising the baby is easier here, you know, and I got no support in Atlanta. You're gone all the time. We'll just make it work, but I'm not coming home. I'm like, oh, okay. So a month later, obviously that wasn't acceptable to me. It's like, as a man, I have to be with my family. Like, that's just not, and I knew it was coming. In the back of my head, I knew it was coming. I knew I was in the wrong because I was not providing for the emotional needs of my wife. And that's what a man's not supposed to only provide financially, but he's just supposed to take care of his family and treat his wife like Christ treats the church, right? And so I knew I wasn't doing that, so I knew it was coming. And so through prayer and through lots of prayer, I just quit my job. I quit. I didn't have anything lined up. I quit. We were renting a place downtown Atlanta at the time, and got a U-Haul, and moved all my stuff back home to her parents' house in Waterloo. I said, here I am. And my father-in-law members said, well, what are you going to do? I'm like, I have no idea. But I'm not going to lose my family over my desire to make a lot of money in Atlanta and fly all over the country. Like, that's just, I know that's not the answer. So something else has to be the answer. So God's divine plan. I mean, I put my resume out. 3 days later, I get a job with Federated Insurance. 3 days. I was unemployed for 3 days. Without even searching beforehand, I had a job. So I knew that was a God moment. Like, I knew I made the right decision through prayer. God blessed it. Now I can still provide for my family. I'm home in her hometown, and life's great. So I get into sales, and it's insurance, commercial insurance. I do well. I hit all my numbers and get all the awards. And there's a company called Martin Brothers Distributing, food distributors. You probably see their trucks in town every Tuesday, Friday. When I was a captain my senior year, we had a campaign going to raise money and for the program, and I would do public speaking to different businesses around the Cedar Valley, and I got to know Brooks Martin, the owner of that, through that program. And we hit it off, and we became friends. And I always knew this company, it's a family-owned company, privately held, treated their employees great. It was an up-and-coming company. And they actually called me one day and said, hey, we got a job opening, and we'd like you to interview for it if you're interested. And I said, absolutely. I'm open to all opportunities. And so I get hired there. Went from 2 years in sales to I'm 27 years old. I got hired I was a manager, district sales manager, to manage $60 million worth of business. And it was quite the shock. Being responsible for yourself is one thing, but then being responsible for 12 other sales reps and $60 million worth of someone else's money is a shock at 27 years old. But it was awesome money, great money. I'm like thinking, man, this just fed into my ego, right? Growing up, like nothing can stop me. Never been cut from a team, never, just fed right into it. And I took the job. I spent 10 years there, doing great, financially. Personally, and ethically, morally, I went from a great spot from God answering my prayer in Atlanta to getting me a job in Iowa to a slow decline of what wealth, what ego, what can do to a person. Because the more I succeeded with Martin Brothers, the more they told me I was so great, the more they paid me, the more they wanted me to be around, the more responsibility they wanted me to take within the company. And I was like, yes, yes, yes. Well, now 5 years into my career with Martin Brothers, I'm back to where I was with the insurance company in Atlanta. I'm taking business trips where I'm gone 4 nights a week. Okay? Now we got 3 kids. Now my wife's back to, I'm being a part-time dad and part-time husband because I'm gone all the time. I revert back to, well, my job's to make the money and we have a great life, and Rach, you get to stay at home. What are you complaining about? She's like, well, I'm longing for a family. Like, I want a family. And that was a argument in my marriage for a long time, because I was looking back on it, I was so stuck on, I'm making so much money. I'm traveling, partying. We're going to talk about how I got the money, okay? How I got the money is in sales, especially in the food and beverage world where it's party all the time. You're entertaining clients, like you're entertaining clients night after night after night, and you're in bars and you're paying for everything, and the clients are thinking, oh, you're the man, like company credit card, here you go. It was night after night after night, and I developed some very poor habits. I ended up drinking a lot, and knowing that the only reason I was doing it was to please the people I was with so that they would buy from me, okay? And I was with my bosses a lot of time. I was with the owner of the company a lot of time, and it was just this culture. This is the way it's done. So I went from growing up godly, growing up in the firm Christian faith, knowing right from wrong, to now I'm in this world of money, wealth, and I'm just making poor decision after poor decision. And my wife, being brutally honest, would call me on it every time. Every time. And I got tired of being called out, so then I would tell little white lies. Oh, we weren't out till 3 in the morning. Text her at 11 and going to bed, Little white lies turn into, once you sin and once you break your integrity just a little bit, the next time it's easier, right? The next time it's easier. Then you get into this world, like I heard this sermon by Pastor John. I go to Prairie Lakes. Pastor John, a long time ago, was talking about marriage. Nobody wakes up one morning saying, I want to have an affair and I'm going to wreck my marriage today. That never happens. Men or women have affairs over time. It's an innocent friendship at work or at the gym or wherever you meet somebody. And then it's a conversation. And then it's a cup of coffee. And then it's a slow shoulder to cry on. And then 6 months into a friendship, you wake up and it's like, oh my goodness, what did I do? Right? And it was a marriage talk. And I'm thinking like, I never cheated on my wife. And that was never a problem for me, but it was like this slow progression of doing anything for sales, like entertaining people and being out in bars and casinos. And I woke up, when did I get here? When did I get here thinking going out and entertaining and partying with a customer is more important than being home with my wife and kids? Like, never in a million years, if you'd asked me at 18, 21, 25, is that something that you would see your life at? I was like, no way, no way. But I was there. And so 2.5 years ago, meanwhile, my sales were I was a performer at this company. My sales were booming. So everything I did, I walked on water to these people. Like, they just give it to Kevin, he'll figure it out, he'll do it. Okay, my marriage is crumbling, my integrity is crumbling, but I'm having so much success with work. It was this, it just was a struggle inside of me. 2.5 years ago, so we had a change in leadership. Our CEO retired, and change of leadership comes, and rightfully so, the new CEO is looking at my expense reports thinking, how much money is this kid spending? Like, why is he doing this? His sales are great and everything, but is it necessary? And I remember having the meeting, and they're like, you need to tone down your expense reports. And I'm like, why? My sales for the last 8 years, I've done nothing but climb, and you guys have said nothing but great things, and I've been promoted, and why? Well, it's out of control. Okay. In one ear, out the other. Ego, right? I had the ego thing of, as long as my numbers are good, as long as I'm making them money, whatever. Well, I didn't listen, and this new CEO rightfully so, has no patience for that. And so she called me, 6 months later, they called me back on my expense reports. They're like, well, we thought we told you to calm it down. And I was like, look at my numbers. Like, I'm making the most money out for the company. My district's number one. And so they start questioning some of these expenses, like, who was there? All this money, was it actually customers that you were spending it on? Well, no, some of the times it was customers, but then I would bring a friend or two with, right? And who was all there? Little white lies that I was used to telling, succeeding, and I lied to them. I said it was all customers. It's all customers. Well, they looked into it, and they called me on it, caught me in a lie. And I'll never forget it. They called me to Iowa City, the Marriott there, and that's normal for them to do that. We meet all the time. But I walk in and I see our director of HR there. I'm like, coming in, ego, confident, my numbers are great. Like, what could this be? And they said, hey, we appreciate you, everything you've done here. Your numbers are great. You've made a lot of money for the company. But we can't trust you. Whew. That was the worst and best thing they could have ever said to me. Because if you know me, I want to please people, and growing growing up as a Christian, we all want to think that we have high integrity. We all want to think that we would never lie. We're honest people, right? Because that's what we want the world to see Jesus in us, and that's who Jesus is. But when they said that hit me so hard, I teared up. I was like, holy cow. This whole career here just hit me like I knew this was coming, kind of like with my marriage. Like I knew I was in the wrong. I had the Holy Spirit every time just nudging me like, what you're doing is wrong. I don't care how much money you're making. What you're doing is wrong. And it hit me, and they're like, thank you for your service. They gave me a severance, and they're like, just move on to do something else. Driving home, I was like, what? Now what? I've neglected my marriage to the point to where I thought providing a big paycheck was the most important thing. Now I don't have that. Now I have no big paycheck, and my wife, we're at a point where our marriage is like, she would constantly tell me, Kevin, you're choosing your clients over me and our kids. That came out of her mouth numerous times. And she was right. And I remember driving home just crying like, my wife is right. I've wrecked my family. I've lost this job that I thought was my security blanket. Now what am I going to do? And I didn't know. And to be honest, I still don't know. But if Pastor Jesse at my church 2 weeks ago talked about unmet expectations. Life doesn't always go like we think it should go, like our plans, right? God has plans for our life. But so far, my plans are crushed. I have no idea what to do. So my wife begs me. In fact, she put an ultimatum on it and said, you to get into therapy with a Christian therapist right now, or our marriage is over. And I'm like, well, it's like that, right? It's come down to that. And she said, yeah. And so I love my wife, I love my family, I don't want to lose it. So I get into therapy and I start finding out some things about myself. Like, man, you have such a huge ego. Like my therapist even said it to me. Like, what I love about therapy is, like my wife, they're just brutally honest. Like, they don't tell you what you want to hear. They tell you what you need to hear and what the truth is. My therapist said, when did you become thinking like you're so great? Like, why do you think you're so great? And I took offense and I said, what are you talking about? All the stories you tell and all the talks we have, I can tell you're trying to make me happy and you're trying to win me over. Like, you're trying to sell me on something like how great you are. He's like, I need you to cut the BS. And so we started digging in, like, why do I really have an ego? Like, and it came down to, yes, I do. And I tell you my growing up story, it wasn't until 2 years ago, when I'm 35 years old, that I was cut from a team. I got fired. It's the only time I've ever failed in anything I tried. And so I'm thinking, like, I do have an ego. For some reason, I think I am something special. And I remember God just breaking me. Like, if I'm not a man that can provide for my family financially, then what am I? I'm nothing, in my mind. And I just remember, like, what am I going to do? And meanwhile, my wife has this thriving therapy business. It's not like she's making money and she's got this career. And she came to me and she's like, you don't have to provide financially for us. How about you step up and finally start providing relationally for your kids and for me? And I was like, that is not what leadership to a family looked like for me, ever. I thought a man was supposed to go provide financially and take care of the needs and wants of their wife and kids. And when she said that, I was like, well, what do you mean? She's like, stay at home for as long as you want. But you need to rebuild your relationship with your kids. You need to lead your kids. You need to lead me. You need to provide for me. She's working all the time. So she's like, maybe you can take over all of the other duties. that go along with being a family. You know, and I'll never forget. I still wasn't quite broken yet because I said this sarcastic remark to her, and I said, "What, you mean like be the stay-at-home mom?" And she's like, "Yeah, be the stay-at-home mom." She's like, "That's what we need. That's what our family needs." And I was like, I did not want to do that because for whatever reason, I didn't want to do that. But as time goes on, as I'm unemployed for a month, I'm thinking, I'm looking at my kids, I'm looking at what they're doing, I'm looking at their homework, what their activities. It's like, when did I miss all this? Like, when did they become these almost adult, like they're not kids anymore, like little kids. Like these people that I don't know intimately are the people that I should know the most. And so I dove in and I cherished that unemployment time. I did. I cooked all the meals, I did all the grocery shopping. I still do all that because my wife has a great business going. And I got to this point where finally I said, "God, what does leadership look like to my family?" And he's like, "You're doing it right now. You're providing for your kids, not financially, but you're there for them. You're helping them with their homework. You're taking them to school. You're picking them up from school. You're going to all their athletics, stuff that I was missing before. Your wife comes home after a hard day of work with the house stuff all done, dinner done. She can focus on her practice. We can just focus on spending time together. Life is great, you know?" And I ended up in friendship with Nate. You know, I do coach with Nate, and, you know, through his job at the college, I was able to get on as a custodian from 4 to noon, which still got me home to do all the stuff with my kids, and because I still wanted to work, because obviously when the kids are at school, there's really not much to do. So I got a job. Life was great, and life is great. And now I'm at the college still in a different role, but I want to challenge, that's kind of my story, but I want to challenge us as men, like in your families, like what does leadership look like? Leadership is not just about providing financially for your family. It's providing for your family. And that can look like a bunch of different stuff. But most importantly, what God's taught me is like, Kevin, you chasing money broke your integrity. You know, those people, and I did the right thing. I went back to all those people at Martin Brothers and I apologized and I said, "Listen, thank you for a great career. I'm sorry I broke my integrity with you guys. And we're good now. Like, we have great relationships." You know, people ask me like, "Well, you got fired." I'm like, I hold no ill will to them. That point in my life was great for me. But I want to be sure that I lead my kids know that integrity, honesty, and living for Christ is number one. And that was lost on me for pretty much my entire career at Martin Brothers. You know, God has a great way of humbling us. And what I've learned through that, you know, you go to Scripture and you know, Paul in Philippians, he's in jail, right? So Philippians 4:11 through 13. "Not that I speak from want, for I have learned to be content in whatever circumstances I am in." Contentment is what I've learned to abide in. Like, I've learned to have contentment. I don't have to chase after money. I don't have to chase after the immoral things that sometimes bring money, worldly money. I can just be content with where God has me, leading my family, and trusting in God's plan. I know how to get along with humble means. I can live with not making money. And I also know how to live in prosperity. I didn't do it very well, but I know how to do it. In any and every circumstance, I have learned that the secret of being filled and going hungry, both of having abundance and suffering and need, I can do all things through him who strengthens me. So no matter what my circumstances are, I can have the confidence and faith that I'm going to be okay, because I can do anything if I have Christ as the center of my life. And I lost that for a long time. You know, and I'm so happy that happened, because I've regained that in my life. I've regained the confidence that, you know, just because I'm not making all the money, I mean, because to be honest, money goes away. You spend it, right? The more you make, the more you spend. I mean, money goes away. Like, I'm so grateful. I'm grateful that this didn't happen 20 years from now when my kids are gone. Like, I still have the majority of my kids' life in my house with me. They still think I'm Superman. Like, we have great relationships. And I have that influence, being a godly man now. And I wouldn't have had that had I kept chasing and kept chasing. And I just want to encourage you that be content in your circumstances, no matter rich or poor, abundant or humble. Be content with where God has you, because, you know, Romans 8:28, if you're a believer in Christ, we can live confidently in this. And we know that in all things, God works for the good for those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. In all things, if we love God, we know that in all things, he's going to take care of us. And he's going to bless us. And I have seen those blessings that I cherish way more than I cherish a paycheck. And so that's my story, kind of my faith story, my adult story of struggling, of sinning, of following the wrong things, and how grateful I am that God humbled me by firing me from Martin Brothers. So that's what I got.
Thanks, Kev. We'll keep you up here for just a little bit longer, but for now we're going to cut out of our live stream. But thank you so much for joining us this month. Look forward to seeing you next month. Talk to you later. Guys, any questions for Kevin? Anything that comes to mind? Go ahead, Derek.